All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us again. I'm here with Melody. She is my cousin, family member. And, you know, technically maybe a cousin's cousin, but I like to say cousin.
Why not?
Yeah, because we family. Not only in the church, but blood, you know, maybe. I don't know.
We share relatives.
Yeah. But we are here. This is the Vigil of Hope podcast. And the point of this podcast is to talk about mercy and justice and topics that the church may or may not talk about in the church. And today we're going to talk about addiction. And Melody has an incredible testimony about addiction. But before we do so, let's talk about our sponsor today, which is Vigilant Hope Roasting. And Melody loves coffee. She drinks 6 to 10 cups a day, aka, what do you drink at the roastery?
A matcha latte.
A matcha, yes. She hates coffee.
I don't hate coffee. It hates me.
But if you come into the roastery and you normally get, what's in your matcha?
It's just matcha latte with almond milk and stevia.
No vanilla?
No vanilla.
I thought I used to put vanilla in there for you.
If you did, it was just an added treat. I don't request it, but
yes.
Yeah.
Well, so if you haven't heard about Vigilant Hope Roasting, come in and get your coffee. And you can learn more about what we're doing here in the city and what Vigilant Hope's all about. Just one more fun question before we dive into this, Melody. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I'm going to say flying. I would like to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Or I would love to be able to run through walls.
That could be really fun too. Save you a lot of time.
Or what about the superpower to run red lights?
And not get caught and not have an accident or both. It's a superpower.
I don't know if I'm alone in this, but every time I get to a red light and I can't see, I just have this urge to just slam on the gas and just run through the red light and see what happens. I don't know if you've ever had that.
I can't say that I've ever had that.
I would like that superpower just to be able to see a red light and just run straight through it. I think it might be better for me mentally because I really get frustrated at the red lights. But
I find them opportunities to take a pause. So
you're just such a better person than I am. Because,
I just need that moment every now
maybe your
and then.
superpower is just to fly over them with your car. Yeah.
Okay, I could fly with my car. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive into this because I really do love the story and I love that you're sharing it. And it is, for our listeners, a tough story. And this topic, addiction, is something that we at Vigilant Hope really advocate for more opportunities for the church to talk about it, for people to talk about it, because the more and more we do so, the more we advocate for being with those people in addiction and being in proximity with them, we believe the better that we can solve some of the issues of addiction.
Yeah.
And you have some incredible insight on that. And so, Mel, give us, just, your testimony and what you've recently gone through.
Okay. Excuse me. I have a son named Stefan, and he got wrapped up in addiction, and he passed away in June of 2023 from an overdose. And he was homeless at the time.
Yeah. How long was he homeless here in Wilmington?
Consistently for 13 months, the last year of his life. But the previous 2 years had been in and out of homelessness.
Give us a short, what was leading up to that, prior to him overdosing. What was his life like in the last 10 years of his life?
I would say he had a lot of changes occur right around the time he was 10. He was diagnosed with ADHD, so school was always challenging for him. And then we moved to another school district right when he started middle school, which I don't think helped. He had to make new friends, and in that he met people who were exploring with marijuana, alcohol, Xanax, cough medicine, and he started exploring those as well. And for him, it progressed. I think that's the thing about addiction. We don't choose it. Some people can do the exact same things, and one person will get hooked and it becomes a crutch for them, and another person can recreationally or casually or socially smoke weed or drink alcohol, and it's not an issue. But for Stefan, it was. And so he as a result, it progressed, and he ended up dropping out of school. He ended up in trouble with the law for various minor offenses, and then he ended up homeless. Initially, we had to kick him out of our home, but he had other family to live with, but he chose to not live there. And then
talk through like what it was like kicking out your son and that.
Devastating.
Yeah.
That was absolutely heartbreaking. That was a boundary I never wanted to have to set. We warned him though, and he had some basic rules that we asked him to follow, and he wasn't able to do that.
Yeah.
One of those was, don't bring things into the house, don't bring paraphernalia, drugs into the home, don't use them in the home.
Yeah.
And then stay in school and get a job. And he just couldn't do those things. And because he was under the influence of something most of the time, he was a hazard in the home, to himself and to us and to property. And it was the hardest decision I think I had to make.
So from your house, he went to another family member's?
Yes, he went to his dad's, and that was 6 hours away, and I don't think he wanted to be that far away. So, but also his dad had set some boundaries and said he had to work, and he didn't want to work, and he didn't want to pay rent. And so then he went to another family member's house, and again, 6 hours away, and then chose to come back to Wilmington and thought that he would very easily be able to, I think, just live with a friend. And that was not the case. And so that was the first time he found himself homeless, which I thought would actually be an eye-opener for him, and that it would motivate him to get his life in order. But I guess that's where the ADHD maybe comes in, and elements of addiction, both. It's difficult to do life when you have something that is all consuming and is driving the car, so to speak. And that's what addiction does. And so, and then ADHD has its own set of issues with being able to organize and stay focused and set goals and follow through with them. So
for you, what was it like? Like, what percentage of your mind was thinking about Stefan while he was on the street, using, drugs and in a tough environment?
it was always on.
Yeah.
Thoughts about him were constant, sometimes consciously in the forefront, other times in the background, but always there.
Yeah.
I was always checking on him. either text or phone call. We spoke every day.
Yeah.
He was very reliant on me to help him with some organization in his life.
Of course.
And then when, as you know, while he was homeless, I was doing other things to help him, such as getting clean laundry to him, clean clothes. Things would be stolen, his phone, his backpack, his skateboard. So I found myself always replacing things and making sure that he had his basic needs met. If nothing, well, you know, shelter is a basic need, but I tried that too. I paid rent for him in places, and then he would get kicked out because the substance use was beyond what most people will tolerate, unfortunately.
So with like your insight and your wisdom and going through this journey with Stefan, what do you think the root cause of addiction is in your experience?
I would say first and foremost, the root cause is an unformed or a broken relationship with God.
Oh, that's so good.
Someone who doesn't know God and they're dealing with hard things in life we're always going to turn to something.
Yeah.
And if it's not God, it's going to be something else.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, addiction is probably at the top.
I love that analogy because it really does lay the playing field, because whether or not we like to tell ourselves, but there's things in our lives that we idolize, things that, whether it be money, whether it be TV, or, you know, other things that we just struggle with, our phones. It kind of is that same, but if we're not willing to kind of sacrifice ourselves before the Lord. But of course, addiction is such a weighty thing, and it's so hard. But that's such a beautiful analogy, because we're all broken,
Right.
you know, but yet Jesus is that foundation. When we turn our lives over to us, he does make us complete.
Yeah. And we're going to cope with stressors in life. So and if we can't take that to the Lord and let him carry our burdens, then we're going to find something else to numb our reality, disassociate from our reality, to get through it. And so I would say second to that would be, you know, people experience trauma or some significant life event that is very painful. And they may turn to addiction because of that. Or, you know, and unfortunately, mental health, especially if it's undiagnosed, mental health problems, or and ADHD. I think there's some statistics that say that people with ADHD have a higher potential to fall into addiction, for the very reason that I was mentioned before about just finding a way to cope with the things that we face in life daily. And I know someone who once said, somebody who has ADHD, and they were a regular marijuana smoker, and they said that they use this analogy of driving a car. And if the average person is driving 60 miles per hour, a person with an ADHD brain is going at 100 miles per hour. And so when they smoked weed, then it slowed them down to 60 with everybody else. I don't know if everyone who has ADHD feels that way, but I thought that was an interesting analogy. So I can see how people would turn
would
to
turn to it. Yeah.
substances
Especially if they're not willing to turn to the Lord as well. That's
or
something. Yeah.
medication.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Let's turn the corner because really what Vigil and Hope believes is this: the church is this answer to poverty, and things around poverty, and addiction often leads to poverty and is a part of this. And there's an analogy that we use about a river and folks standing on the side of the river. And the folks that are in need at times are the ones floating down the river, and we're on the riverbanks reaching our hands out and saying like, "Hey, we're here. Yeah, grab my hand. Just grab my hand." But there's part of me that wants to bend that a little bit and say like, shouldn't we at times want to just jump in the river and literally like bear hug them and crawl onto the river side and it's like, hey, like I'm here, like let calm down, like we're in this together. But there's also these other times, there's other like, end of the spectrum of like, no, like you probably need to flow down the river a little bit more. I would imagine that this was a constant struggle with Stefan. Yeah. You didn't know like, whoa, Lord, do I jump into the river with him this time? Do I have, I mean, a good example. I mean, you had to kick him out of your house. And I think this is where we've seen the church struggle. It's like, I oftentimes it's a little bit sense of a little bit too much compassion. It's like, we're just going to jump in and we're all going to do this together. And then everyone's dying and everyone's struggling just to make their way back and they can't even get back. Mm-hmm. But then there's also the other end where like, we ain't going to help these people. They deserve where they're. So it's so complex.
Yeah.
I'm really but I love that analogy of how it can really kind of shape our formation of how to properly help folks in that. But I think it would be cool for us to hear sometimes that maybe you did jump into the river with Stefan. And, we heard a little bit when you didn't jump into the river with him. But kind of expand on that if you don't mind.
There were probably quite a few times when I jumped in the river.
Yeah.
And as far as a specific scenario, I would say there was a time when he jumped in a car with total strangers in the middle of the night and ended up in Jacksonville, had no idea where he was dumped out beside a gas station. I have no idea the details of that. And he was calling me to help him, but he didn't have his phone either. And he was calling me from a random place. And I ended up getting a hotel and an Uber for him so that he could at least be sheltered in this town that he didn't know where he was. I would say that was probably an example of jumping in the river. But at the same time, though, I didn't, because I didn't get in my car and go get him.
Yeah, you drew the line.
So I did set a boundary there. But
you jumped in with a life jacket on.
Yeah. I guess that would be a life jacket example.
It's so complex.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I will say those moments like that were all consuming. I can't even count the amount of times that I had to leave work early, that I had to call out of work, that I had to cancel plans in response to crises that were going on with him. And so I would say those were all jumping in the river moments for sure.
But maybe this is a really hard question. What was the hardest, when you jumped in the river with him or when you didn't?
They were both difficult in their own ways. The stress, the mental and emotional stress that I went through day to day with the situations that he found himself in were excruciating.
Yeah.
And then, but then whenever I wouldn't, I always questioned.
Yeah. Yeah. You wonder.
I
what
always
should
questioned
yeah.
if I was doing the right thing. Am I doing what Christ would do?
Yeah. Wow.
And am I hearing God, or am I hearing myself, or am I hearing the enemy accusing me of
guilt and
not
yeah.
stepping in?
Yeah.
So it is a very, I don't think I give you a direct answer, but
No, I wasn't expecting one because this is a hard, and I just want to say, like, this is so weighty, and you're helping me, and I'm sure people listening how to better approach this. So I'm sorry that I haven't done this yet. Thanks. Like, this is huge. This is a huge step for you also in your story that you're confident in doing this. So for I would love to hear, because we're again, Vision of Hope has this platform as we're trying to empower the church to help in these situations. What do you feel like the people around you in your church and your church people did really well during this time when you were going through this really, really tough time?
well, I should say first that my closest circle of friends, community, are all from different congregations.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Which has always to me felt like that's really how the church should look, is that we're not these individual congregations, but the body of Christ as a whole. Those people were behind me in prayer, constantly in prayer. And then there were a small group of friends that I could text or call and say, I really need your help.
Yeah.
You know, if they were in a part of town that I knew that Stefan was in and he was in a situation, I've had friends go pick him up.
Yeah.
Go take him food.
Yeah.
Take him a tent
Wow.
and gloves, and on my behalf, because I couldn't get there, and or even well check with him.
Yeah.
And I felt so held and supported by those people, and so like that was my church community.
Yeah. They wrapped around you.
They did.
They just championed you.
Yeah.
So that we can learn better. And we're not here to talk poorly. And maybe you don't have any clear examples, but what do you think that the big church could do better or could have done better in your situation?
Yeah, and I don't, this isn't talking poorly. This is hopefully to just bring awareness, because it could be a situation that's not related to addiction. But I do think that there's a stigma, not only in society, but in the church related to addiction. And it's unfortunate because I think that it keeps people from reaching out and caring.
What's that quote that you said?
Yes.
Into it?
Yeah. No, it's not. I was just thinking about that. It's not, I don't even know who originally said this, but
well, I heard it from you, so you should take credit.
What we don't understand, we fear, and what we fear, we judge. And I think it goes beyond that. What we judge as evil, we try to control. And so I think that is the situation with addiction and even homelessness, is that as a society, we don't really understand it.
Yeah.
And so we
judge it and we're fearful.
Right. And we're fearful of it. And so we just avoid it.
Yeah.
And
which is probably literally the worst thing we could do.
Right. Because those people need to be, I don't remember which verse this is, but it's the kindness of the Lord that brings a man to repentance. And I don't know the original translation of that, but like so repentance is transformation, right? And change. And so if we are not presenting the kindness of the Lord to these people, then how are they going to know? the freedom that comes through Christ. So as you know, I will say I've heard one time a pastor speak on addiction from the stage, and actually I responded in an email sharing what I was going through with Stefan, and never received a reply. And actually that hurt.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm not the only parent with a kid in addiction, and
a person in the congregation dealing with addiction.
Yes. And so,
so maybe like saying that we care it could be hurtful if they're not actually putting it to action.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the church needs to do that.
Yeah.
And not wait for those people to come through the door.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to, because they're carrying shame. Along with who knows what else they're dealing with, but they're not going to come through the door.
That's so good.
So we need to go to them, build relationships, which is what I love about what Vigilant Hope does.
Yeah.
And a couple of the other ministries around town that also share that heart of going out into the community.
What was that quote again? Sorry, I love it.
Oh, what we don't understand, we fear, and what we fear, we judge.
Yeah.
And
I think culture teaches that. I often get asked a lot pertaining to folks battling with homelessness. Like, when I see them, what do I say? Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And it's that quote. It's like they're fearful of like what, and I'm like, what? What would you say to me? Like if you just first met me, like why is it any different? What would you say to Melanie that like maybe they may not look the same as you, but I'm often baffled, and I'm a little bit biased because I'm in proximity with so many of my homeless brothers and sisters,
right?
And can understand why I'd be a little bit uncomfortable, but still, as human beings and believers in Christ, like, how could you not read the Bible and see how Jesus presented himself and not want to do the same?
Yeah.
Is always interesting to see. But I love that quote.
Yeah. I will say as a woman, I am careful to go approach somebody that I don't know that may be on drugs.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know their status. Maybe there's a mental illness. I'm cautious, but when I do meet people, I ask them their names.
Yeah.
I say hello. Even if I have nothing that I can give to them, I acknowledge them and I talk to them.
Yeah. That's so good.
And I think, everybody has a story, and people, maybe they don't always want to be heard, but we should at least extend that offer by opening up a conversation, or at least saying hello and acknowledging that they are there.
Yeah.
You are a human. I do see you, and validate that.
So just as we're closing and final thoughts, like what would you say to the listener, the viewer that is ready to do something? What would be an easy first step? And I feel like we kind of hinted at that, but from the great mind of Melody, like what would you in your, because I mean, you've lived this, like I would look to you rather than a doctorate in this, because it's real life like experience and stuff. And so what would you say to that person?
I would say do some research. In particular, Vigilant Hope offers plenty of
nice
forums. I know.
Wow.
But you all have forums, which I think are educational.
We're trying to get you to lead a forum here soon about this topic.
Well, we can have that conversation. Yeah. So for you all offer forums, and but also volunteering with an organization that's already
so good,
boots on the ground, doing the work. And
don't try to start your own thing.
Right. And learn from them.
Environment to practice it.
Right. Yeah. And then from that, I see relationships develop with people who are unsheltered and in addiction. Also, there are groups online. I found a group called PAL, PAL, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, online, and they don't have a local chapter, but I did Zoom meetings with them, and it was very educational on addiction and setting boundaries as family members and being able to love them where they are and walk with them alongside them while still keeping healthy boundaries. And so I think, there are a lot of resources out there. But I would say
Educate yourself.
Join up with somebody who's already doing this work.
So wise.
Yes.
Molly, thank you so much. Again, I know this isn't easy. I know it's hard, and what you've gone through is still hard, I'm sure.
It is.
And I know that that I'm here for you, and I'm sure people listening are here for you. But
thank you.
I encourage you to keep doing this stuff like this, because this speaks volumes. And I appreciate you spending time to be here. So
thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next time.